Farmer Tom here, and today on Heroes of the Green, we got Don Wirtshafter, a legendary cannabis and hemp advocate over the years. And welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, can you go ahead and tell the listeners your story?
Yeah, I was an old hippie back to the lander in the early 1970s. My area was threatened with strip mines, and I became a strip mining activist. And at the same time, my friends were getting busted for pot, and I became a street lawyer about pot cases. And eventually I realized I couldn't win the pot cases and I couldn't fight the environmental cases unless I became a lawyer. So at age 32, I went back to law school, had a child, learned computers all in law school, came back to my small town and opened up a practice. And, it's a small town practice. I helped anybody who came in the door. But a lot of environmental cases and a lot of pot cases in my early years. And then we got Reagan in 1980. It was awful. The minimum mandatory sentences were imposed, so judges couldn't use discretion to give somebody a break. The good faith exception to the search rules came into play, so the cops weren't playing by any rules anymore. And being a criminal defense attorney was really grim. At the same time, we had Reagan and trying to fight environmental cases with the Reagan powers to be in office seemed pretty futile. So I felt I had to come up with the magic bullet for trying to affect these criminal justice issues and the environmental issues at the same time. And I became a hempster. I can't even say why. I credit my friend Cliff Barrows more than anybody. I met Cliff standing on the corner of my small town, handing out the last leaflets that Normal possessed. He was trying to revive Normal in the early 90s, 90, 91. It was about a dead organization, and Cliff and a few others succeeded in bringing it back to life. And at that time, I turned my law office into an entrepreneurship. I wrote the hemp seed cookbook and bought sterilized hemp seeds from a mill and started selling the cookbook with the seeds. I felt like I was doing people a disservice to sell them the cookbook without the seeds or the seeds without the cookbook. So we sold them together. And eventually that got old as we were hauling 50-pound bags of seeds up the stairs and boxes and boxes and boxes down the stairs. And so we got a new headquarters, and the business took off for a while. It didn't after a while. It felt like everybody wanted to buy their first hemp object, but trying to get them to buy their second-hand hemp object was difficult. They'd already saved the world with their first hemp object. And so we didn't have the sustaining sales that we needed to see to be able to really throw money at that business. I spent years helping other businesses as an attorney. I ended up farming. Well, in 93 or so, 92, we put money into a joint venture with a Chinese mill for bringing in the cloth and with a company in Amsterdam that was breeding varieties of cannabis for medical use. And so I became part of that company. When that company did a beautiful job of breeding, but didn't have any clue how to actually take it to medicine, we looked for the right guy to take over the developments, and we found that in Dr. Jeffrey Guy. And so Jeffrey was going to take over the work of Wirt Farm, and then he ran out of money. The money he was going to use to do this fell apart. I ended up finding the right shareholder for us and starting GW Pharmaceuticals, and worked for them for many years. Continued with some fingers in the hemp industry, but really I spent many years being very quietly working in the medical industry. And, GW developed the two prescription drugs that have been created out of cannabis, Epidiolex and Sativex. Sativex is not available in the US, but it's been available in Canada since 2003 without controversy. It's available in 38 countries, but they can't get it over the line here in America, or they're not trying very hard. There were many years working with these pharmaceutical scientists and executives where I kept hearing, but cannabis has never been accepted as a medicine in the United States. And I thought that was wrong. Knowing a bit of the history, I realized that 100 years ago, cannabis was a big medicine in the United States and that it was unfairly taken off the shelves. So I set out to prove to these guys that cannabis really was a accepted medicine. So I began to find these bottles on eBay and through other sources that contained cannabis prior to 1937. And it wasn't just the Park Davis cannabis extract bottle that's become almost an icon. Pretty much every major drug company in the 1920s and 30s was putting out cannabis medicine. And many of them were using it for really high tech uses like pain control. And it was in 25,000 medical products at the time. We've collected over 1,000 of these bottles. And these range from early 1830 apothecaries, glass apothecaries, ceramic apothecaries, even a couple wooden apothecaries. And in this apothecary era, cannabis was a very important ingredient in the medicines that these apothecaries would prepare for each individual customer. And in the beginning, these apothecary jars were the high-tech design, a display tool of its kind. People hadn't seen glass. It was very unique, very rare. And so that to have these glass jars on the shelf was really quite beautiful to people that are in almost magical. And then for them to be able to look in the jar and see what things were. People didn't read that much at the time, but they, had good observations, so they could point to what they wanted, see what they wanted, and point to it. So the glass was very handy. It was also much more sanitary than anything that had been invented before. But glass was really expensive, almost to the price of gold at the beginning. And as the technology improved, as the furnaces got better, they started to use coal and better metallurgy, they developed these two-piece molds that could mold a bottle faster than three-piece molds. And then they came up with these mechanical molding machines. And bottles went from being really expensive, something that stayed at the store, to something that you could take home with you, even dispose. And so this collection that I've accumulated traces that history from the apothecary to the modern drugstore. And it shows that cannabis was able to make that transition from being a raw herb to it being a refined extract that was standardized and properly labeled, date coded, batch coded, and would fit on a modern pharmaceutical shelf today. So it isn't that pharmacies stopped carrying cannabis because it was not useful or not in favor or any of those things. Until 1937, there was a trade in it, which is why the American Medical Association opposed the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, because they found that cannabis was so useful, and their testimony before Congress showed that there were really no bad effects from it, and you weren't creating addicts. So I've got that collection, and I figured, well, as long as we're going to create a museum about cannabis, you might as well collect everything. So in the last 20 years, I've collected hemp breaks and hemp hackles and hemp rope making tools and hemp fabric and fiber making tools and cloth and clothing from all over the world where our ancestors clothed themselves in industrial hemp. Um, we've got almost 5,000 books here that are all organized and barcode labeled and everything. We're trying to get ourselves organized. And so my COVID project was I bought this old building here in Athens, Ohio. I'm in it now. I've spent the last 14 months getting it ready to be a museum. It was a 1907 general store for a coal company. So I kind of like that. We're taking coal stuff and reclaiming it for modern uses. But it's been a difficult year of trying to meet all of the state specifications to turn this old building into a modern auditorium. It's a Class A structure so that we can pack it with people and have seminars in here or dances or whatever we want. So we're getting ready. I swear this coming week is the week we're going to get past all of our permitting and get our occupancy. And then we're going to be able to open the Cannabis Museum here in Athens, Ohio. You can find out some of our work is at cannabismuseum.com. Check us out. And the Cannabis Museum has an Instagram account that's pretty active. And find us on Facebook and all that stuff. We have not been open to the public because we haven't had a suitable place for it, and because until now our security hasn't been good enough to be really loud about what we do. We're sitting on a whole lot of beautiful antiques, and we don't want to lose them. Now we're in a fireproof, really strong, secure building, so we can be a lot louder about what we're doing. And I still continue to work with a few cannabis companies that need my legal services. I've got investments here and there, but mostly I'm retired, not taking on legal cases, and I've been more of a general contractor the last year than anything else. What questions does that bring up, Tom?